Good morning, everyone. I love that. My name is Jason Robert. I'm the director of the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics and the Lincoln Chair in Ethics here at Arizona State University, and it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all. To get the show started, I'm going to introduce you to David Lincoln, who is our patriarch, our benefactor, and our visionary in the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here and welcome all of you to our seminar. And it's going to be an interesting one. It's about privacy, and one of the things about privacy that has recently occurred is that they now have a way of having a drone fly by all the cell towers and pick up all of your cell phone messages. And you wonder then, what is the relationship between technology and privacy, and how do they interact? And we may be hearing some of that today. I'm not sure, but I hope we do, because technology is doing a lot of things in the world, many good, but some you wonder about. So anyway, have a good seminar, and thank you for coming.
So you're not going to hear much from me, and I think that's a good thing. I'm grateful that we've got a really terrific crew of faculty and staff mentors here with us today. It's so nice to see so many faces in the crowd. I understand traffic was pretty miserable this morning, so I'm glad that so many of you were able to make it here. And I want to underscore that you're welcome to get up at any time to go ahead and fetch more cookies, because of course at ASU we think breakfast includes cookies, but that's only because it's cheaper than anything else, and we want to make sure that we're able to feed as many of you as possible. So get up, have some cookies, some lemonade, some water, so that we don't have long lines, and we'll be mingling for a few hours here this morning. I'm going to start us off by introducing one of my colleagues from the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics, Adriana Sanford. Her bio is in the little packet on the table in front of you. She's an attorney with a number of years of international experience working in global corporate settings, and she's going to get us started with the notion of data brokers.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and for the Lincoln Center, and of course for David Lincoln and what he does for us here at ASU. I would like to talk to you about an issue that I think hits all of us very hard, and it is a struggle. It is a struggle today to keep our privacy and at the same time to be able to communicate with everyone out there on the internet. A lot has changed since the internet started in the mid-1990s. And today we're going to talk about data brokers and how they affect you. And actually, maybe some of you are familiar with this, but a lot of you, I'm sure just like I, don't really know the extent of where they are and how they affect us. There are a lot of different social networks out there that we participate in. There's Facebook, that allows us to communicate with our friends and family. There's LinkedIn, that allows us to do business. We also have our little GPSs that tell us how to get to places. All of this technology is wonderful. It's great for us. It allows us to do things quickly and more efficiently. But there is a concern, and the concern is our privacy. How much are we compromising? Different countries look at privacy differently. In our country, we look at privacy and one of the tests is whether we believe we have an expectation of privacy. Well, I can tell you, most people today in America don't really feel they have an expectation of privacy, and they've kind of given that up in order to buy that iPhone, in order to buy those shoes over the internet. Other countries, such as in the EU, they believe in a basic right, a fundamental right to privacy. So the approaches are different, the laws are different, the regulations are different, and sometimes this can be difficult. It can be difficult for our multinationals that are working all over the world. If you take a look at a company like Facebook, Facebook wants to make everybody secure, everybody feel safe. This is basically the ability for them to bring in new business, new users. The problem with a company like Facebook is that they have to comply with the laws here in the United States and in the EU and in other parts of the world. And some of those laws require notifying you of a data breach. Some of those laws involve telling you about your privacy. And so you are able to see this in their privacy policy. But they have to comply with the laws of various countries, and sometimes this can be a problem. And we'll get into that. But first, let's talk about the data brokers and how they affect you. Well, data brokers appear everywhere. They appear on Twitter, and they actually partner with Twitter. They partner with Facebook. DataLogic partners with Facebook, and it partners with Twitter. They're not going to tell me how much ice cream Mr. Jones has had on a Friday night. They're not looking at your wall. But what they will tell me is 20-year-olds, 20-something out there, when they break up and all of a sudden they change their data to single, because you're able to say you're single or you're in a relationship, a lot of them go out and buy ice cream. That's the kind of information that DataLogic collects. How do they do that? They partner with Facebook, and they partner with your loyalty card. When you go into Safeway, when you go into one of these markets and you're buying ice cream, they put this information together. Does this bother you? Does this concern you? Maybe not that. Maybe you don't mind that we know that 20-somethings, when they break up, buy ice cream. TLO actually is another company that gets background research. And what they do is when you're driving your car, they collect the information from all these cameras, when you're running a red light, from your license plates. They collect all this information and they give it to law enforcement. They not only give it to law enforcement, they sometimes give it to law firms, and they sell it. Can you opt out of having your data collected? This is a good question. Well, on Facebook you can. It takes 30 days. But each user in your household has to do it. For TLO, no. Unless you want to ride on dirt roads. How about if you want a mortgage? If you want to go buy a car? Some of you haven't gotten your first car yet. There are companies out there like Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. They collect all your information so that you can get your car. But they also sell that information. Life events. They sell it to advertisers. Advertisers that want to target you because you're about to have a baby. You're expecting a baby. You're buying your first home. See, now maybe some of you understand that these companies gather your information, but to what extent are they using your information? All right, so you're not on Facebook. You drive on dirt roads, and you don't need a car. You don't need a new car. So none of those will touch you, but you are on the internet. When you're on the internet, there are companies that track your IP address and can tell your name, your location, your zip code, all of this other information. Can you opt out of that? Sure. But the problem is every time you use a new browser, you have to do it again. Or if you get a new computer, you have to do it again. And for those of you who have tried Match.com, OkCupid, I'm not sure what else is out there, but there are a few of them. You got to be careful with those. Because yes, you want to meet Mr. Right or Mrs. Right, and you're willing to give out all your information for this. Some of these sites will actually ask you hundreds of questions because they're going to match you. Personal questions. and you're really excited about this. But what you don't realize is, first of all, who else is going to get access to this? And sometimes they're bugs. Sometimes inadvertently this information leaks out. And there are people there waiting to gather that information. So the next time you really want to be honest about all these things and put them online, think about that. If it's something that's precious to you, keep it precious. So, what's going on? How can we protect ourselves? Well, I mentioned a couple of different ways. You can go online, you can opt out, but you have to read and find that notice and find the privacy policies in these different sites. With regards to the last one, there's a group, I forget the name of it, but I think Spokio, Been Verified. There are a few of these in which you can go online and you can say, I want to know more about this person. And you can find out their public record, if they've had an arrest, all these different things. Well, if you want that information kept to yourself, you can contact these companies and let them know, Been Verified, Spokio, and all of these different ones that all of a sudden pop up with your information. Show them your state driver's license, and within 7 to 14 days, you can delete it. But what I've just given you are a whole bunch of different ways to opt out of different things. I'd have to make a book so that you can protect yourself. And guess what? Not everybody does. Our students don't. Our children don't. Some of our senior citizens don't, because this is all new, and there's so much out there. So, other ways to protect ourselves. And then I'll give you other ways of building your identity, because you can turn this around. The next time you break up with somebody, pay with cash if you're going to get ice cream, and pay with a credit card if you're going to get spinach and vegetables. So, but EU data protection reform is out there. We have a new reform coming. The EU data protection directive has been out there since 1995. The difference between a directive and regulation, the directive was non-binding. So we had 28 EU countries taking variations of this data protection directive. That worked pretty well in the 1990s, the mid-1990s, but so much has changed now, including the revelations by Ed Snowden that prompted the EU to say, our data, our privacy, basic human right, we're going to create a regulation. Regulation is binding. Is this good for us? Yes, absolutely. Why? For our multinationals, everything is going to be streamlined now in the EU. No longer are you going to have to comply with France and Spain and Italy, and if there's a breach, you have to notify a data protection authority in every one of those countries. That's been very, very difficult. Now US companies doing business with the EU, everything will be streamlined. This is supposed to happen next year, this data protection regulation. Right now, they're still negotiating, they're still tweaking. So this is going to be great for multinationals to streamline the process. How is this going to affect you? Well, not only is it going to be for those companies that decide to do business in the EU, but the extraterritorial effect is even broader. It's going to affect any company that decides to provide services or monitor the EU. So what does this mean for you? Well, what that regulation says, among other things, right now it's saying 24-hour notice of any breach. So companies like Facebook not only have us as users in the United States, they also have members of the EU. If they must comply with a 24-hour notice of a breach, that means everyone else here is going to find out about it, because we have newspapers, we have social media, we have the groundswell. Now, it's questionable right now whether there's going to be 28, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. This is what the companies are right now discussing. Okay? Companies are saying, wow, that's too quickly. We can't turn around that fast. So what I can tell you is it's going to be shorter. So you're going to know that your information has been hacked. This is not only for knowing about our data, but it's also, we recently have had issues with our credit cards. It affects technology everywhere. So this is good. Another issue, our information is being collected. This data is being stored. It's gold. Data brokers are selling it. The EU has something called the right to be forgotten. This is the right to delete or erase or not post your information after a certain period of time. What is that time? It depends. It depends on why that information is out there. But what I can tell you is if you did something when you were 24 years old and you can't get a job now that you're 40, because of that information and it's not relevant, that information will be deleted. Again, these are issues that the companies are concerned about because they're like, how can this really happen? You know, we saw Barbara Streisand's house when she wanted that deleted, how it spread, and everyone was able to see it. So how can we really protect ourselves and how can we really have that right to be forgotten? That's what they're working on. But the good news about this is when it happens in the EU, it will give us hope. And what I'd like to see is reform, data protection reform on both sides of the Atlantic so that our multinationals can deal with this a little bit better. I'd like to end just by saying that, a lot of you are concerned about privacy. You should be concerned, but there is hope. And we're going to see so many changes next year, and they're going to be good changes for our multinationals and for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And our next speaker this morning is Erika Gronek. Erika is the Manager of Marketing and New Media in the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics, and she is actively involved in collecting all sorts of private data about all of us all the time. And I'm going to have her say a few things this morning about privacy in our daily interactions. Erika.
So some of you may be confused. Some of you may be thinking, wow, she must be a student. And some of you must be thinking, oh, she's too young to know anything about this stuff. Well, actually, about 20 years ago, I graduated ASU. And that's when I got into the internet biz. I started doing websites, and I now do social media and video and web. And 20 years ago, I graduated ASU with a tabula rasa. There was no information out there on me at all, because the internet wasn't that popular. It was just beginning to gain speed. There's my birth records, my birth announcement, my social security number, and my state ID. That was it. That was all there was on me. Although I did write one terrible C-level paper on a film once that I did publish on the web. It's a movie called Metropolis, and I posted it out there, and because it was for a fan site, and that was it. That was all there was about me in 1997. Now, for you guys, most of you are in high school or early college. You could probably relate to this because Edward Snowden said that a child born today will grow up with no conception of privacy at all. They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves, an unrecorded, analyzed thought. And it's a problem because privacy matters. Privacy is what allows us to determine who we are and who we want to be. Now, how many of you, raise your hands, are on Facebook? And how many of you joined when you were 13 years old or in that area? Okay. And do you think your 13-year-old self is going to reflect who you are when you're 40? God, I hope not. So that's something to be concerned with. It says that right there in the terms and conditions that you should be at least 13 years old to have an account on Facebook. And everything you put out there is going to stay out there in one form or another. Let's see here. How many of you have seen the movie Fight Club? It's a good movie, isn't it? At the very end, there is a scene where Project Mayhem blows up like all the business buildings, all the computers, all the data centers, and the main characters are free of that digital footprint. And when I watched that movie, I thought, that's funny, because that's not going to happen. That information doesn't disappear. It is backed up and co-located all over the country, all over the world. This is kind of an interesting cartoon related to privacy, because when I was growing up, I was reading things like 1984, and I also was a political science major at the time, and communism had fallen, but I was raised with that fear of nuclear war and communism and so forth. And so it's ironic that now it's not communism that's going to be the big brother. It could be social media and the internet and other people judging you for what you post. But that's not the end of it. It's not just social media. It's all the internet. Let's see here. Now, this is just a blurry image that you probably can't read, but it gives you an example of some of the things just Google knows about you. Your search history, your Android devices, if you use Google Wallet, what sort of documents you have. I have lots of documents on Google Docs. Gmail reads my mail and then sends me little messages saying, hey, some event's coming up. Do you want me to put it in your calendar? I enjoy that. It's really nice. It's convenient. It's kind of creepy, though. Google owns YouTube, so they know what you're watching, which could also be creepy depending on what you're watching. So there is a way to clear that from your history, by the way. So, and of course, it knows your passwords and so forth. Good times. Adriana was talking about data brokers. This is a really messy graph showing just a small smattering of the types of data brokers out there who can't wait to use your information in one form or another. Information is power, and you're giving out your information. So be careful on when you're giving out your information. And nothing is really lost until your mom can find it. She's better than Google. So how many of you did the pre-work where you had to do a Google search and find out as much as possible about Maxwell Amherst? What did you guys learn about him? Anything? His political preferences, how old he is, what kind of person he is? Was anyone able to figure out a few things? Go ahead.
I found out he likes cosplay.
Yeah. That's, and that's cool now. He might become a lawyer later, and then all of a sudden some picture of him in costume comes up on the internet later and embarrasses him. So, that's, although I like cosplay, so yeah. All right, so have you ever asked yourself how technologists use social media? I'm going to present a short video that shows you how 3 technologists use social media.
I'm a software developer, architect, and team lead.
Quality assurance director and a process improvement director. I also dabble on the side in several businesses.
I am a software engineering consultant.
Obviously, the biggest is I've been able to stay connected with people who I either had lost connection with before or would have lost connection with. But I have used it to enable other people to connect. So for example, I have gotten other people jobs via social media, connected the right person with the right skill set that way.
For my own personal businesses, I use it to keep in touch with customers, kind of drive interest. Personally, I am an introvert, so I use it to kind of passively keep tabs on my friends and family.
To promote my business, connect with colleagues, and maintain a professional presence on the internet. I largely use LinkedIn for this purpose.
I usually, when a new one comes up, like, yes, I made a Vine video. I posted a Vine video of my cat. And you know what? I created the account, posted one video, and I've never been back. I use Twitter to post more professional things, either related to my industry or things that I'm working on. Because I know that goes out to everyone, so I want that to look a little more professional. Facebook, on the other hand, I try to limit to only people who I've met face-to-face, who I know kind of on a personal level. I do post announcements because many of the people I'm linked with on Facebook are also in the industry. So if there's a new security breach, for example, I might post a warning to all my tech friends, hey, change your passwords or try to get a new credit card or something. LinkedIn, of course, is another popular one. Obviously, that one is specifically geared towards career and business type communication. So, of course, I don't post things about my family or my pets on LinkedIn.
For personal, I post kind of wacky statuses every so often just so I can bring those friends into the fold and find out what they think and get some comments back. And then for my business, it's updating what I'm doing in the studio.
I actually don't post very much.
You definitely have to assume that anything you post, even if you're really good at locking down all your Facebook privacy settings, anything you post might go public. So I would never want to post anything that would say hurt me or someone I knew in a way, like if they were applying for a job and someone did a Google search and this came out, a picture of them doing something irresponsible or something like that. Those are the type of things, and maybe strong political views, because if you're interviewing for a job, honestly, I don't really necessarily expect everyone that I'm interviewing with to agree with me politically. So if I've said something that's very, opinionated in one direction, I wouldn't want that to hurt my ability to develop a professional relationship with someone. So I do try to avoid some political subjects.
Any topic about money, any topic about religion, so the three main things to stay away from in any in front of people or not in front of people topics.
Whenever I post, I'm very careful to make sure that anything I put up there, regardless of how private I think it is fit for consumption for the entire world for the rest of my life.
A fundamental concern is anything you send an email, anything you post on Facebook, someone could simply take a screenshot or could copy and paste it. Facebook's a little more dangerous because someone can reshare sometimes depending on your settings or tag you in an image you don't even control. So I do try to go through Facebook, especially every time they have an update and they say, okay, we've changed our security settings, and I try to go through there and I try to limit the amount that people who I'm not friended with can see or do with my material. But a step to take is to understand that once it's out there, you are a little bit out of control of it. So for example, even if you broke in to my cloud accounts, you won't find naked pictures of myself. So that's a security step I take.
I've locked Facebook down, I've locked LinkedIn down. It's only open to friends, and then I specifically request getting those invites, and then I decide if I'm going to take it or not.
When you send something on email, when you post something in a social media outlet, when you put it on the internet or through the internet in any way, you really do have to be very conscious about what you're saying and doing. And so I'm usually pretty quiet, with the exception to things that are directly related with my family and business. You won't find much frivolous stuff being posted under my name. The fact that there is none, we know absolutely and very clearly, and not only through Snowden stories, but actually directly from the CTO of the CIA. Big Brother is very definitely watching, whether you have a cell phone in the room or you're posting it on Facebook. So I'm very careful about what I put out there. If I want it private, then I make sure that I encrypt it and have the keys stored privately, and that's something that's actually not very easy to do from a technical perspective.
Probably having my identity stolen and specifically targeted toward my credit, taking money, stealing credit card information.
The whole thing is always a trade-off, right, of what you're willing to give up for the convenience. So, for example, when Dropbox first came out, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to use it because I know that at first I'll only put a few files that I need to move around on there, but then I'll start using it more and more, and then all of a sudden my personal files will be up there, maybe even financial records or things like that, just because, you know, it's difficult to always keep things isolated, and once you start using something, you kind of let your guard down and you kind of let stuff up. It is going to get worse because what's going to be more common, I mean, there's already some apps that do this, and it's going to start becoming ubiquitous where when you and I start a message, we're going to immediately get our GPS locations and see exactly where the people are. And hey, if I'm wearing a health band, you might even see, hey, he's running a fever, you know, or something like that. There's going to be more and more real-time sharing of location data and health data and, you know, how you're feeling and things like that. And users are going to constantly have to make a decision about, is it convenient to let someone know, let my friends monitor me to know if I'm in a restaurant nearby, then maybe they'll call me and say, hey, why don't you join us? We're in the restaurant next to you or something, versus constant GPS tracking by your friends, you know, or people that maybe you don't know really well.
So what I would like to know now from you guys is, what are some of your rules for social media interaction? I have my own personal list, which I'll give to you in a few minutes, but I want to know what some of your rules for protecting your own privacy are. Anyone want to volunteer anything? Go ahead. He locks his Facebook account down so it's only his friends. Okay. Anyone else? Go ahead. Yeah, that's a good one. Make sure you're not signed into Google, because Google can then, you know what your search history is and connect it with you and your computer and your IP address and your sign-in. Anyone else? Okay. One thing is, it's like the guy with the beard said, it was it's kind of a slippery slope. You enjoy using this technology, but what do you trade for convenience? Here are some of my rules, and it's not a hard and fast rule because so much can change. Some of my rules are, I only friend people I've ever shared air with. In other words, I have been in the same room with them and have talked to them. Don't friend people you currently work with generally. Friend them after either party's term of employment is over. Keep personal details private. Use an alias if necessary, if you need to do something else that you don't want people to know about. Which I won't expand on, keep a professional persona and a personal one. Don't let the two circles mix. Lock down your permissions on the personal profile and make sure your professional profile looks up to date, because that's your best face out to employers. And master your permissions. Make liberal use of untagging pictures you don't like. If you are creating media and broadcasting it, you are part of this entertainment business called social media. You are your own PR manager, and so take control of your image. If you work for social media like I do, I make a new profile just for work. Remember, what happens on the internet stays on the internet. And don't feed the trolls, and don't be a troll. You know what trolls are, right? They're the people who just go out causing trouble on the internet. There was a story recently of a politician named John Huppenthal who, under a not very well hidden alias, said some bad political things about another group, and it got out that he that he said these things, and it's probably ruining his career right now. Social media, if used right, is not evil. It can inform you. It can help you network, and it can help you get a job. It can filter information that you want to see, and what your peer group wants to see. So it's a tool. Don't become the tool. Let it be your tool for you. And let's see here. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Google your own name all the time. Just make sure that you're defending your reputation. Within Google and the Google email program, you can put a Google alert out on your own name. So that way, if anything about you is posted, whoop, it comes right up. And actually, I have Google alerts on all of the Lincoln professors because I just want to make sure what they're doing, and I can promote that through the Lincoln Center. It's an example. And then defriend and block unstable people because, you don't want bad boyfriends or girlfriends coming from, the past. Think like this meme here. This is the evil plotting raccoon meme, if you're familiar with it. This is just an example. It's like Apple introduces fingerprint scanning, world's largest database of fingerprints without even trying, Stuff like this. Think a little bit like a criminal. What could someone do with that information? And what sort of nefarious mismarketing could they do with it? Let's see here. Could anything that you post be misconstrued or used by someone else? If you really have to look at that thing you're not supposed to look at on the internet, clear your browser history and clear your cookies regularly. No naked pictures, of course, and don't tell everyone when you leave the house on vacation. Avoid completely public profile. Don't post pictures of children on completely public networks. Don't put your address, no bank accounts, no phone numbers, no email addresses. Even have a special junk email address for stuff like that if you want to. And don't use that single sign-on for where you use Facebook or Twitter to gain access to something on a site. It'll also give you the option of just signing in. It gives you more power and it keeps the information less networked to you. It's more distributed. And don't use the same username and password on multiple sites. As we've seen last holiday season when Target got hacked. Well, that was through the point of sale thing. But Home Depot got hacked and multiple sites have been hacked lately. And they do that partially with those big name ones because they know people are taking those same credentials and using it on multiple sites. So now you've lost your anonymity. Absolute truths about social media. Policies and technology change. You've noticed this probably with Facebook. You have your Facebook settings just the way you want it, and then Zuckerberg decides to change things on you. So keep an eye on that. You don't control the data. You may think you have control of it today, but you may not have control of it tomorrow. And whatever you choose to publish becomes part of the anthropological record. It becomes part of your legacy. So how do you want your book to read? You are the gatekeeper of your image, your persona, and your data, and you are your own PR person. Here's some food for thought as I conclude here. Some good resources and things that will spark ideas. Go to a website called Ars Technica. You can really keep an eye on the latest updates and changes with regards to tech policy. If you're as old as I am, 39 years old, check out a website called The Wayback Machine and see what else about you has been published. You may do a search on yourself or a Google alert search and you find your current stuff, but then you think, oh, well, some of those sites have expired and that data is long gone. But the Wayback Machine takes a little snapshot of old websites and preserves them in time. So, check out yourself on the Wayback Machine. And then 4 films that I recommend on this topic are Terms and Conditions May Apply. It's a documentary. It's amazing, and it reminds you that if you actually spent the time to read the terms and conditions on most of these sites, it would take 1 month of work time to read them all. And so, we know that most people don't read the terms and conditions, especially 13-year-olds. And 3 films that I think should almost be a trilogy is this old 1970s movie called The Conversation. It's about surveillance, which then ties into Enemy of the State, which is a movie about national security and surveillance, and then Minority Report, which is kind of clues you into what's coming up. And okay. I'll just bring up my slide here.
So Erika posed a challenge, namely to think about the rules of engagement that you might adopt in your own daily interactions with social media. Adriana pointed out that if you're not careful about these rules of engagement, it's pretty crystal clear that everybody, many different places, many different companies, many different interest will be able to identify, aggregate, link together, and potentially use all kinds of information about you. And so what we want to do now is have small group discussions just for a short time, 10 minutes or so, thinking through some of these rules of engagement. What are the things that you are most concerned about? What are the things that you are most likely to change in your own privacy-related behavior? And then, both Adriana and Erika hinted that we care about privacy, or we should care about privacy. But don't forget that the title of the symposium today is Should We Care About Privacy? And so we'd also like you to think about whether, in fact, you are concerned about privacy, and if so, why you're concerned, what you're concerned about. So we'll spend about 10 minutes. We'll then have an opportunity for a couple of quick comments from the floor before we move into the break. Mary, did you have something? Thanks very much. On the packets on every desk, on every table, there are some thought-provoking questions that might help guide the conversation at your table as well. And then the Lincoln professors and faculty who are here will scatter around. If you have any questions for them, please go ahead. So we'll do this for about 10 minutes and then reconvene. All right, everyone, we're going to come back together in the plenary. If anybody wants to report back either a fascinating or horrifying comment from their table, please do. We've got a couple of microphones set up here in the middle of the room. We don't have time for a whole lot of comments. We're not going to get a report back from every table, but I'd love to hear from those of you who are especially interested or especially horrified by what your discussion held for you. Come on up, pretty please, to the microphone, and thank you. And that just showed up on YouTube.
Oh.
There we go.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Elena Pearson. I'm from Arcadia High School.
Excellent.
I think too often we focus on ethics in separate categories, like the ethics of social media, the ethics of Facebook, the ethics of internet in general, all this stuff. But I think if we think of ethics more of a widespread topic, I mean, if you use ethics in what you're posting instead of saying, separating, oh, well, I can say this to this person in person, but I have to use a separate set of ethics to talk to you on Facebook, that might kind of settle some problems, and maybe stuff would be more appropriate what we're posting, and people wouldn't cross the line of, judging your Facebook while I'm hiring you for a job and whatnot, if that makes sense.
Thanks. That does indeed make sense. So this idea that we ought not maybe to compartmentalize as much, but really think a little bit more holistically or systematically about our ethical character. I think that's a very helpful starting point. So thank you for that. That's not horrifying, right? That's helpful. Good. Okay. Come on up. Yes, sir. Yep. Yes.
Hi. It's too okay, I don't like it. My group talked about trail mix and tweeting about trail mix. And one way we decided to keep safe on the internet was Isaiah suggested that you could tweet everything in Spanish, and that would keep you safe. And Peter said that you can use not popular social media sites such as 4channel, and that's about everything we have. Thank you.
What's trail mix? Do you mean like literally the...
Yeah, the snack?
Yeah.
Well, but you take the raisins out because raisins are the work of Satan.
I'm not sure what to make of that, but I'm glad to have heard it. And notice there was no privacy there, right? He reported on exactly what the different people said. Who's Isaiah? I just want to know which one. There we go. Very good. And somebody else points him out. Okay, one last comment from the floor. Yes, please. We're going to have two. We're going to have this right here and then you. Please, come on up.
Hi, I'm Susanna. I'm from Seton Catholic Prep. So my group, we're talking about how, we were doing research at school about it too. And so you can visit websites that have a lot of websites have random advertisements for things you don't control over. And sometimes if you have a website that comes up with an advertisement for alcohol, there's your insurance company, you get put on a list. Your insurance company can buy that list and your name on it, and they can raise your premiums because you're at risk to be a drunk driver. And there's some people who don't drink alcohol at all, or they drink it really sparingly, and your insurance company doesn't know whether you do or you don't drink alcohol. And so at this point you're putting out I think it's a big deal, because you're paying money for something that you're not it really doesn't concern you.
Right, you're actually being penalized
Yeah.
for behavior that you're not actually engaging in.
And you can't control what advertisements you get. And yes, sure, sometimes the advertisements you do receive are search specific, but so often they're about the randomest things. And you visit sites that you just don't have. It's not in your control, and it's scary how not in control you are.
Thanks, that's very good. All right, last comment.
So we had a conversation about Snowden and relative to ethics, and the question was, is he a hero for revealing the egregious collection of information that we weren't aware of, or is he a criminal? And how should he be treated in our society? Mm-hmm. We didn't have an answer, but we had an interesting discussion about
Absolutely. That. Criminal, hero, or both, potentially. Thanks very much for that. That's helpful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break for 15 minutes. So please, I was informed that we purchased 2 cookies per person. So don't have 3. Whatever you do, don't have 3. If you've already had 3, make sure you bargain with a friend to have only 1, so we're all right. And please help yourself to the lemonade, the coffee, the water, and we'll be back at about 10:20 for our... It's a distinct pleasure now to introduce to you our third presenter of the morning, Dr. Gary Marchant, who is the director of the Center for Law, Science, and Innovation here at Arizona State University, geneticist, PhD geneticist by training, then a lawyer, and then a public policy master's awardee, and most recently, for the last, 20 years, law school professor here. Is that that long?
No, 15.
15 years, a law school professor here at ASU. So Gary is going to speak to us about social media picture sharing.
Great. Thanks, Jason. So my topic falls on nicely with the ones we've had earlier this morning, if I can get it to work. So I'll be talking about social media. It was interesting talking with some of you about which social media companies you all are interested in. It was interesting to find out a lot of young people are not into Facebook. You think Facebook is the megalith here that sort of controls the marketplace, but a lot of young people, it seems, are moving away to things like InstaChat and Twitter and so on. My view of social media, I sort of think there's a lot of benefits to it. I think some of our speakers this morning also mentioned that there's a lot of reasons to like social media, and particularly when you're older like me and some of us in the room, we see the difference before and after social media, being able to keep in touch with friends and family and colleagues, to meet new people who have similar interests of us, whether it's the same sports team or the same interest in a hobby or whatever it is, that to be able to connect with people is just so powerful, and something that we didn't have when older people were growing up that you have now, and you may take a little bit for granted, but it's so amazing way to be able to collaborate and connect with people. I like actually that, so I'm going to Chicago this week. I was researching restaurants and hotels in Chicago last week, and now when I do searches on the internet this weekend, all these Chicago ads are popping up all of a sudden. I actually like that. That's useful to me. I'd rather have that than New York ads or something like that. Some people find that creepy. So there's a lot of benefits of this, but it's also incredible risks too, as we've talked about this morning, of you're now sharing the same information with all kinds of people. So I want to dwell in on that a little bit more with some of the examples. One is your employer. So this is an older statistic. This is 3 years old, saying 37% of employers now search for potential employees on the internet. And that can be a big problem. We had a student in our law school who had an offer rescinded from a law firm because on her Facebook page she was holding one of those red plastic glasses you get at parties. That often indicates drinking alcohol. She claimed she was drinking a soda at the time, not alcohol. But they said even if that was the case, the fact that you would put that as your cover picture on your Facebook page shows a certain type of approach to life that we don't really like much in our law firm, and therefore we're not going to have you join our law firm after all. And so just little things like that can make a huge difference in your professional career. This is one of a company that basically searches the internet for companies, about their employees. And what they say is that by leveraging our unique tool, we'll provide automatic detection of employee social networking presence. Even employers are using personal aliases for communication. Provides the ability to record and archive all the monitored communications and content, whether for a single employee or a select set of employees. So when you go and work for a big company, they may be monitoring everything you're doing out there on the internet, even under different names and so on, and trying to figure out what it is you're doing and why and so on. There's been all kinds of examples of people sort of blowing it. This is a guy who got his first job as an intern in a bank, and he emailed his boss. It was Halloween. He needed to go to work to a family emergency in New York, and so he couldn't come to work. And in fact, he went to this party dressed as a little fairy intern, as a fairy, and put a picture of himself on his Facebook page, of which his boss got it sent to him, and then sent a copy of this to everybody in the company, and basically saying a nice wand and firing him for lying. And so, simple thing again that cost him his job. Here's another one who wrote on her Facebook page, "Oh my God, I hate my job. My boss is such a whatever wanker, always making me do stuff just to piss me off." And the boss then replies, "I guess you forgot about adding me on here," and then goes on to tell her, "By the way, you're fired. You can pick up your stuff," and yes, I'm serious. So you never know who's looking and who you're connecting to or connects you to them. Certainly politicians, it was mentioned, John Huppenthal, who basically lost his re-election as our education secretary today because he had some views he wanted to express and he didn't want to do it officially in his official name, but so he created an alias and that got caught up with him. People were able to figure that out and tie those posts to him. And it caused him huge problems. Similarly with a lot of political appointees. The proposal for Surgeon General, he was basically blocked on Capitol Hill because of some tweets he made about the NRA, which is not a group you want to get mad at you when you're trying to get confirmed for office. So think about elections 20 years from now. Many of you are going to grow up and become involved in different types of jobs and possibly politicians. I'm sure some of you will end up running for something, whether it's dog catcher or president or senator or state legislator or state attorney general, whatever it is. Everything you've said for the next 20 years is going to be out there for the other side to research and find out about you. It's totally going to change the future of elections because you now have this incredible record of everything you've said for the last 20 or 30 years. Or get appointed to an important position in the government, even if you're not a politician. Again, that will all be dredged up and used potentially against you. All kinds of people get busted for criminal acts. By things they do. These are some guys a couple of people who basically did a prank in Domino's Pizza and pretended they're spitting on the pizza and put it on YouTube as a joke, and they got fired, but they also got criminally charged for attacking this company's credibility. And all kinds of criminal cases are now being brought based on what people are saying on Facebook. This is just a little chart I'm tracking of the number of Facebook criminal cases in the reported cases in the legal world. And one thing a lot of people don't realize is that when you say things, even if they're protected with the highest degree of privacy protection, that's zero protection in a legal proceeding. A private party, if you're involved in a lawsuit, whether it's a divorce case or a contract or whatever it is, they're allowed to get what's ever behind your firewall. They have a right to access relevant information to that case. Or in a criminal case, the police are allowed to go, if it's relevant information, find out what's ever behind that firewall. So just because you make it private doesn't mean you're going to be protected in a lawsuit context. All kinds of examples of embarrassing pictures coming back to haunt people. This is a guy named, I don't know if you heard of him, Star Wars Kid. It's still today the most viewed video on YouTube. And it's this 12-year-old kid who, in his garage, was pretending he's Star Wars, Duke, whatever the name of those people are, with his doing his sword and jumping around and so on. And he was doing this on a school camera. He thought he erased it, but it was still on there. One of his classmates found it and put it on the internet, and it just absolutely went viral. And he just was hugely taunted and teased at school. He actually had to drop out of school and get hospitalized, actually, because it traumatized him so much. He's actually going around giving talks now about this. But just one little foolish thing just basically destroyed not only his career in his school, but his whole life was brought down because of this one stupid thing he did in the privacy of his own garage, and someone posted it online. You've, of course, heard the recent controversy about all these celebrity photos that are leaked on the cloud. A lot of people's who aren't celebrities' photos were also leaked at the same time. I actually know a student whose friend's material was put on the web because of the same attack. And so it wasn't just celebrities. They were looking for any naked pictures on these cloud-based servers and putting them on a public web that people could then come and look at and make fun of. Revenge porn is a huge problem. You may have heard of this, of the idea of you take a picture of yourself in some kind of revealing or semi-naked or naked picture and send it to your boyfriend or girlfriend to use privately only, and then you break up because all these relationships never work out necessarily how you think they will, and that person will then post it on the web to get back at you maybe. And all kinds of sites are now popping up to post these and to host these. 13 states, including Arizona, have now tried to make this illegal, but our law here in Arizona is currently being challenged in court, and most constitutional experts think it'll be overturned as unconstitutional. It's going to be basically a suppression of First Amendment because it won't allow, for example, books in bookstores to be sold and so on of art. So it's very hard to draft laws to protect you on this. We don't have what we talked about, Adriana talked about in Europe, of the right to be forgotten here. And so things that get posted on these internet sites are going to be there for a long time, if not forever. This is an example of one tragic story, but there's many of these. This is a girl in Canada who, at a young age, with a couple friends, they sort of were fooling around on one of these online sites. I think it was. I forget what it was actually. But it was a video, and one of them says, "Why don't you flash your breasts?" And she quickly did that. And someone else, some 50-year-old guy, got a hold of that and then blackmailed her and threatened to tell her parents if she didn't do more pictures for him. And so she did a number of other naked pictures for him, which he then posted online. And she was teased remorselessly in her school and called all kinds of names and was just absolutely had to drop out of school. She had her parents, she moved to a different city, and because the internet goes everywhere, people quickly found out about it there. And so she did this little video of basically talking about how she did this one stupid thing, and it was just this sort of on the spur of the moment, and it's basically ruined her life ever since, and she's done everything she can to get away from that, and she cannot escape it. It's there forever. And then she committed suicide. And there's a number of examples of this where that same thing, where it basically will follow you the rest of your life. I actually had a student in my law school class who went out drinking one night with a couple classmates in Scottsdale and ended up throwing up in a bathroom in a restaurant, being too drunk. And some people do this when you're young and it's forgotten and you thank God it's gone. But today when you do that, his so-called friends took photos of him and posted on a website called Dirty Scottsdale with his name. And so whenever he would apply, and he hired a lawyer to get that taken down. He had no right to. He has no right to that picture, even though it's him. Unlike the situation in Europe, if it's a picture of you, you would have that right. Here you don't. If someone else took the picture and you're not a minor, they can post it anywhere they want. And so he is really worried about ever getting a legal job because law firms will all search for that, his name, and will find that awful picture of him on the internet now. So what we want to do is sort of go to a hypothetical then, sort of these types of issues. Of you're in a situation where a friend of yours tells you that he's posted an embarrassing picture of his former girlfriend, who's one of your classmates, on his Facebook page, or maybe it should be Instagram or some other, since none of you young people like Facebook anymore. He's invited you to be his Facebook friend so you can view and pass on the picture to as many people as possible. Your friend really wants to get the picture distributed as widely as possible to get back at his girlfriend for dropping him. So the questions we want you to talk about and think about is, when, if ever, is it unethical to post a picture online of someone else without their permission? Does it matter if the picture was one of the ex-girlfriend voluntarily shared as opposed to one that was sort of hacked from her computer or phone? Is it ethical for you to seek out and view the picture of that ex-girlfriend online? So one of the arguments people made when these celebrities were all hacked and their naked pictures were on is that we each have now a choice, not only what our own information goes out, but when someone posts something bad about someone else, embarrassing, one way we can try to diminish that is by choosing not to go look at that. So, is it ethical to go look at these type of pictures when someone else's embarrassing picture gets posted? It's out there, so you could argue, hey, why not? It's not hurting anybody to go look. But on the other hand, maybe that's one way we can exercise some control. Is it ethical for you to send the picture to other people or to post on your own site? Does it matter what kind of picture it is? Is it just them doing something goofy, some goofy expression? Is it them naked? Is it what is it that they're doing? Would that affect your answer? What if the person whose picture it is asked you to take it down? Would you do so? And then finally, would any of your answers be different if the picture was of you? Just think of you being in that situation, and how would you feel if these pictures are being passed around your classmates and people are laughing about you? I always think that in class, when I see these people laughing, I can tell something's going around this classroom in a meme, linking to each other, and I think, oh my gosh, they're laughing about me. Is my tie straight, or what's going on? I got food on my face. But it's very embarrassing when it's sort of people are all laughing about you, right? And so how would it feel if that was you that your classmates are talking about because of some stupid thing you did for a few seconds? So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to break for about 10 or 15 minutes and have you discuss these questions, and then we'll have a few of you give comments back. Thanks.
All right, folks, we're going to get back together now. I'd be curious to know any thoughts or reflections on the social media picture sharing, either the scenario that Dr. Marchant mentioned or some of the other conversations that might have come up at your tables. There's a microphone right here and a microphone right there, so I will look forward to some volunteers. I see a hand. Come on up. Oh, and I see you first, so you go ahead while this one... No, come on up, come on up, come on up. Get ready.
On?
Go.
How do you turn this off? Oh, okay. So when we were discussing this topic, we were looking more at the political side, so it's going to get a little real in here. So this is obviously a very big issue, and we were discussing why isn't law taking hold of this issue, and we realized how slow the law passing process is compared to the speed of what social media is going at. So really, when we're looking at pictures, we're looking at something for 3 seconds, laughing, not even looking at the story behind it. We're just looking, go on. And then after that, like every month, there's a new social media coming out. So once we pass laws for one social media, which takes forever, another one will come out, and that one won't even be relevant anymore.
So that's a nice observation. You know, one of the things that Dr. Marchant has studied for some time is what they call the pacing project, and it refers to this lag, the ways in which the law lags behind technological advance. And I don't know if I mean, 3 of the people on the panel today have law degrees. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but Adriana, Sanford, Gary Marchant, and Brad Allenby all have law degrees. So I'll defer to them if they want to make a comment about what's going on with the law in this space. Did any of you want to say something real quickly in response? And if so, jump up at the microphone.
Okay.
Really quickly, though, because I don't want to make this young lady wait too long.
It's okay.
I think you're exactly on point. I mean, the major law we have covering a lot of these electronic communications is made in 1986, before there was even the internet, and that's the law we're still applying today.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
But there is hope out there because we have the upcoming EU data protection regulation, and it will be binding not only on the 28 countries in Europe, but other parts, other regions of the world are waiting for this framework because everybody needs this. We're going to see changes in Africa, we're going to see changes in Latin America, and hopefully we will see many changes with our laws here. Right now, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is the one that's overseeing these issues, but we're going to see a lot more changes when the EU data protection regulation comes out.
Thanks,
New
Adriana.
laws.
All right, so we've got 4 rapid-fire comments coming up right now, and then we're going to move on to our next panelist. So please, go ahead.
Okay, so in my table, we mentioned like how an issue that I'm concerned with is like how celebrities are now being like stalked about paparazzis like even more than ever. So now with the drones, I think that's gonna be like way easier for them to like get even less privacy. So like if that's affecting them, then at some point it's gonna affect us as people. And I wouldn't like to like go out of my house and like have someone like, oh hey, I saw in a drone a video of you going to Safeway. Like that's gonna affect us at some point, you know? So it's something that people should be concerned about.
So thanks very much. Just a couple of quick thoughts immediately come to mind. One of them is there's a Safeway near campus here, and one of the things that a lot of the professors worry about is whether their students are going to see them there buying the embarrassing things that we all end up buying. If we grab a great big package of toilet paper, for instance, I don't worry about that if I'm doing it at a Fry's in Ahwatukee, but I do worry about if I'm doing it at Safeway on Rural. So what this promises potentially is a greater expansion of that sense of vulnerability, and also. Insofar as Erika mentioned earlier, that we all need to be our own PR agent, there's an interesting question about when we're all, in fact, going to be, as it were, celebrities.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, who wouldn't want to be famous, right? But
well,
yeah,
it depends.
Yeah,
Thanks very much.
At some point. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we talked about the ethics of sending nude photos, and I don't know how many people here are familiar with the term slut shaming, but a lot of it we think has to do with gender. Anyway, like with males, if their nudes get leaked, then a lot of people blame the person who leaked them. When we use the celebrity example, the women were charged with, oh, you shouldn't send nudes. That's not okay. Like, do you want to further elaborate?
Yeah, I feel like we're sitting at the same table, but we're talking about the way male and the way, what would I call it? We'd just say boobs, I guess. How guys are allowed to show what boobs, but females aren't. There's a big controversial thing about with Chelsea Handler or a different guy, and she's not allowed to do that. And then slut shaming, how she brought up, she was taunted and told like, why would you post that online? But how come all these models posting like half-naked pictures? It's fine. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about how that's really like sexist feminism in a
right.
way.
So it's interesting because there are two interesting things going on in that comment. One of them is the difference between how we treat ourselves and how celebrities get treated, or how we treat regular people versus celebrities. And the other, the more fundamental issue that the slut shaming focuses on is the real incredible, in this day and age, gender bias or gender difference in the dissemination, or the assignment of responsibility for the dissemination. And so this nice point that, in fact, when a man's naked picture is leaked, people blame the leaker, and when a woman's naked picture is leaked, people blame her for having the picture taken in the first place. And that's a remarkable observation. Thanks very much for bringing that up. Adriana, did you want to say something very quickly?
With regards to that issue, there's a comment here that I think needs to be made. Some of you may already have experienced this. Some of you may have information or pictures that are leaked out there. And it's not the end of the world. You make your reputation. Only you can harm your reputation. And if somebody has put something out there, if it's a naked picture of you and you didn't want it, if they've made comments about you and it's out there, it's not the end of the world, okay? Taylor Swift does not look at the internet because there's so much bad stuff about her. So don't think this is it. And employers know this. If there's a picture of you out there and you're a good student and you're doing well, think about what the future holds. Let that go. Now, if you're doing it every weekend and you're posting every weekekend, then be concerned that your employer is going to see this and it's going to hurt you.
Well, that takes us back, Adriana, to the comment we
Yeah.
had earlier from a table about how we ought to think a little bit more holistically about our character rather than just individually about what we're sharing. But let me also say, I'm not so sure that I'd be so cavalier about whether, in fact, it's the end of the world. It might not be the end of the world, but it's pretty damn serious. And in fact, one of the most serious things somebody brought up in conversation with me on the break is that if you are in possession of images of underage people, or if you disseminate images of underage people, even if they're your age, you can be brought into the adult legal system and treated potentially as a sex offender for engaging in this kind of possession and distribution of pornographic material of underage actors, as the case may be. So I think the comment, so I don't want you to respond to me, Adriana, because I want to hear from the student, but I do want to say it's interesting that the stories that Gary told us about social media picture sharing, in fact, are all tragic stories. Nobody ends up doing well when naked pictures get leaked of them. And this idea that we're all in charge of our own reputation is only true insofar as we actually control the data. But people, in fact, control the data.
I do agree with you, but I don't want anybody to go out there and think this is the end of the world and maybe commit suicide over a picture.
Right, I'm not encouraging anybody to commit suicide. That is not my point.
No, but that's
but my
what
point
I was
is,
trying to say.
I also don't want to downplay how serious it is, and so it's really important to make sure you, if you do find yourself in this situation, to get whatever kind of professional support you can.
How does this go back in?
Like that.
Just, okay.
And last comment.
Fixed it. Okay, hi.
Hi.
An issue came up where I didn't really talk about it much because I kind of wanted to save the question for the people who would know the most about it. But when you take a picture with someone and they agree to take the picture with you and you don't like the photo or whatnot, or even if it's taken without your consent, when are the rights to the photo forfeited from you?
It's a good question. I'll turn to my lawyer friends or colleagues.
Whoever takes the picture owns the rights to it.
Might I ask what system in place protects people from that?
None. Only
Exactly.
if there's some protection if you're a minor, but other than that, there's no protection.
Well, and a celebrity.
You can't use it commercially.
Okay.
So you can't use it commercially, and there's nothing in place to protect you, so maybe it's best to not have pictures taken of you ever. Be a ghost.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move on to our next speaker. You know, when Brad Allenby talks, it always does sound like the end of the world. And so he is a remarkable scholar here at the university, the Lincoln Professor of Engineering and Ethics, but who focuses very heavily on military operations, national security, and some pretty intriguing things about the techno-human condition. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad Allenby to scare us all for the next 15 minutes.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so what I want to do is talk about geopolitical structures. You people, no. No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a couple of issues, and then I'm going to focus in on drones, because drones are something we all understand. But what you need to understand from the beginning is the way that different perspectives are built when it comes to national security. Most of you don't realize it, but this country has been at war for almost all of your life. And this country will be at war for all of your coming life. And you don't know it. Most of you don't care. Most of you have never been exposed to it. Most of you were told when 9/11 happened, go shopping. You represent probably the world's most aggressive, most active military power, and most of you are clueless. So the thing to remember when you start getting into these issues is that most of the people you talk to and most of the politicians are not going to understand the world that they're already in. And if you're serious, you'll try. Most of you probably won't, and that's fine. Living in a fantasy world is a great thing to do, and we're making it easier and easier for you. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a fantasy world. All right, so with that cheerful start, let's go to some framing questions about privacy, national security, and emerging technologies. First place, what privacy are you concerned about? Privacy vis-a-vis who? Who are you worried about? Are you worried about the government? Are you worried about NSA? Because if you're worried about NSA, NSA does not care about you. NSA gathers a lot of information on you, which it uses to feed into algorithms that help it understand broad patterns in deep data. Because if it cared about each and every one of you, it couldn't do its job. Frankly, the best way to avoid NSA is to be boring, which is why nobody in the government cares about me. Are you worried about other governments? Snowden focused on the US government and annoyed many other governments, including notably Germany. This was an effective part of Putin's strategy for Ukraine. So it turned out later that the Germans were doing the same thing, they just weren't as good at it, which is probably what annoyed them. So you need to think about what governments you're worried about. And for most of you, this isn't going to be a problem, because for most of you, the governments are irrelevant. They don't care about you any more than the US government. Are you worried about your friends and family? Because that's where a lot of this comes from, right? So people see drones and hear drones and they think the US government is going to be spying on me. No, it's probably going to be the neighborhood kid who's flying a hobby parrot over you while you're trying to sunbathe. Is that annoying? Sure it is. But that's not the same thing as, for example, a search by a government agency. We've talked a lot about some of these. It's important to realize, I think, that privacy is a really, really important thing that all of us really want to protect, and it's gone. Get over it. The most dangerous thing you can do is think you have privacy when you don't, because then you're going to do stupid things. Right now, part of what you see happening in a lot of our discussion today has come from the fact that when you are looking at changing technology that changes the information structures around you, it's going to involve a transition period. It's going to involve that 50-year-old guy at IBM looking at a picture on Facebook and saying, oh, that's not appropriate. When, of course, he did the same flippin' thing. It's just there was nobody with a camera. Eventually, people are going to learn that the kind of information that's out there on everybody is far more than it ever was. And it's not that the pictures are wrong. It's that we haven't learned, Gesundheit, we haven't learned to think about them the right way yet. And that takes time. Societies change much more slowly than technology does. And you need to understand that, because the one thing you don't want to do is get caught in the middle of that change, because you'll get mushed. You're an individual, you don't count for anything, you'll get mushed. All right, a final question to ask yourself is, are you interested in privacy or are you interested in anonymity? You can walk down the street in New York City and you will not be private, but you will be anonymous. That's one reason people used to like cities in the Middle Ages, because they could go there and be anonymous. But they weren't private. So think about the values that you're really interested in. It's easy to say privacy is threatened. And it's also relatively meaningless unless you know what it is you're talking about. All right, so a couple of framing questions. More. What technology are you concerned about? Gesundheit. Drones. Well, when you say drones, nowadays, of course, we think about the predators that are flying over you, thinking about whether or not they are about to commit another murder of a US citizen. All right. But that's not probably the ones you have to worry about. Right now, we've got bug-sized robots that we can fly. We've got hummingbird robots. Look those up on YouTube. There's a really cute picture of a hummingbird flying inside a building, a little mechanical hummingbird. We have the bigger drones as well. The thing to remember about all of these is that they're only platforms. It's people that decide what those platforms are going to carry. So if I have a robot hummingbird flying around, I can put a camera on it, and maybe if I'm a divorce lawyer or Fox News or CNN, that's what I'm going to do, and it's going to make American political life even more wonderful than it is today. Or maybe I can put a rice and stinger on it, and I can turn it into an assassination weapon. There's no reason I can't buy a parrot from Amazon.com, look it up, it's a couple $100, it's got a great camera, and it'll carry a small chunk of explosives. If you really want to do that kind of thing, it's right there for you. You can buy it on Amazon. As far as I know, you can't buy the explosives. You got to do that yourself. So it matters what kind of technology you're thinking about when you start to get into the issue of, are drones violating our privacy? Drones are a platform. Drones are not what violates your privacy. The use of them does. And finally, it gets a lot more complex when you look at the kind of structure that we're operating in, because we really don't have good rules. This goes to the point that was raised earlier about the fact that our laws have failed to keep pace with technological change. That is true across the board. It's particularly true in this area. So let's say that you're a freedom fighter, which is what you prefer to be called. Everybody else calls you a terrorist. And you're on vacation in Yemen. And you're having a gay old time until you look up in the sky and you see a predator. And you go, oh my goodness, am I in trouble? Part of that depends on who's flying that thing. If it's the US Air Force, it's flown under the existing laws of war, and every strike is vetted by the JAG Corps of the US Air Force. You may not agree with their call, but every one of those strikes is carefully approved. If it is an intelligence agency, then there are very, very few rules, because intelligence agencies routinely operate outside of legal structures. If it is a private company, goodness knows what the rules are, because it may be determined by contract. Now, the technical legal answer is, well, it's the rules of Yemen. Good luck with that one, because the person flying it is never going to come anywhere near Yemen, so the fact that Yemen's laws should be applied is essentially meaningless. Or, of course, it could be any one of a number of other parties. So if Google's delivering things to your door for Amazon.com, and both of them are taking the information and feeding them into the maw of the companies that we've been talking about today, the reality is that that package, that structure across the entire of your life has already eroded your privacy to the point where it's really smart to think that you don't have any, and if you do have a little pocket of it someplace, just kind of protect that and admire it as an endangered species. What kind of questions are you going to talk about in the discussion groups? Well, okay, one would be, what are some of the beneficial uses of drones and some of the disconcerting ones? Beneficial ones? Well, for example, a lot of companies are using drones to keep an eye on their infrastructure, which means that they can provide you with electricity, energy services, telecommunications, and do it a lot more inexpensively because they can keep an eye on their system. Some environmental groups are using drones to monitor the behavior of companies or organizations that they think may be violating the law, killing animals inappropriately, that kind of thing. A lot of hobbyists are using drones to take all kinds of cool pictures on YouTube. It depends a lot on what the overall package of uses are for these technologies. Should the police require a warrant before they fly a drone over your property? Right now, there are controls on, for example, government helicopters flying over your property. The police would have to, as a government entity, follow the Fourth Amendment. Notice that that nasty kid next to you with a parrot drone does not have to follow the Fourth Amendment. So again, who is running the drone? Who are you worried about? What kinds of additional privacy concerns would small insect-sized drones raise? This would be a great technology for divorce lawyers, just in case any of you are thinking about becoming divorce lawyers. Talk to Gary. One of the things about these kinds of drones is that we've developed the ability to run them, but we really don't have the ability to put good cameras on them yet, and energy systems are proving to be a challenge. There are rumors that they've already been used to track crowds of demonstrators in Washington. To the best of my knowledge, these are just rumors to this point. There's no question that that technology is coming. And finally, should it be legal to shoot down a drone flying over your property? So those are the questions that we're going to throw to you. How many minutes?
We've got 15 minutes for such questions.
Okay, so 15 minutes for discussions and then to follow up.
Thanks.
So we said concerning the drones, like surveillance of houses, when police force does surveillance on a house, they're allowed to stay outside the house and monitor it, but are not allowed to go inside the house without a search warrant. So what is stopping? There should be a problem with drones doing surveillance on the house without breaking into the house without a search warrant. Yeah, so I'll turn it over to Eduardo.
All right, so one of our discussion points was that we don't own the air, we own the land. So the drone should be able to go into the air without our permission. And then you also shouldn't be allowed to shoot a drone either owned by law enforcement or by any civilian because that would be destruction of property.
Those are good points. There are towns in Colorado that have passed ordinances allowing the shooting down of drones, primarily in areas that tend to be fairly anti-government. And so the assumption behind the ordinances appears to be that most of the drones are going to be government drones, soon to be followed by black helicopters, I guess. Which is interesting. I mean, if the UN ever manages to get a bunch of black helicopters, and all heck is going to break loose. So yeah, and to the other point, you have an expectation of privacy under the Fourth Amendment, and under the Fourth Amendment, that still holds. But that's also, and correct me on this if I get too far off base, Gary, that's also somewhat technology dependent, because your expectation of privacy will shift as the technology shifts. So right now, for example, you're obviously entitled to expect privacy in your own home. If we develop a lot of technologies, and this just isn't drones, this is technologies, for example, that allow you to see through walls and things like that. If we develop enough of those, it may change what a reasonable expectation of privacy is. Thank you. Oh, one from here, yes, please.
Hello? Okay. So at our table, we kind of, over the course of the whole discussion, we've been kind of thrown into like 2 or 3 different perspectives on it. At the beginning of like your speech, you were talking about how it's kind of ignorant to assume that we have any privacy left at all. Personally, I agree with that completely. The way that we grow up, we're very social people, especially over media. And as far as personal safety goes, we think that it's either, do you go from the perspective of if you're stupid enough to do it and to get caught on camera doing it, like maybe are you kind of just setting yourself up to be put in a situation where, you know, your privacy is not helping you at all. Like it's hurting you in your career and how people see you. But on the other hand, should we, you know, try to help each other like that? Should we be reporting pictures that we see of other people that's hurtful? As far as drones are concerned, I think that, I mean, if the government is going to randomly assassinate you, there's not much you can do about that. And so it's not really, I don't think that's where we should be focusing maybe awareness at. I think awareness should be really focused on your personal choices, because really with how much media that we all use every day, I mean, people are more focused on, you know, having their own image and having an individuality and being seen. You know, that's why we are on social media. And so if you're not using common sense, I mean, I think that's where the awareness should be put, is how to use your common sense and how to keep yourself safe and protected over social media. And I think that's a little more important than focusing on a random government, you know, conspiracy stuff.
Certainly it'll have a lot more impact on you. And I think we're going to see very different cultural patterns as a generation that is comfortable with social media begins to move into positions of power and authority. The problem you've got now is you've got people who grew up with, I mean, real newspapers and things like that, and probably saw dinosaurs when they were young. And you've got yourselves growing up in a completely different technological environment. And so the difficulty is you're caught between two different views of the world. That'll change when you take power, with the caveat that you're going to have the same problem with unknown technologies with the kids coming up behind you.
Right, and that's another thing that we discussed, is it's kind of hard for people our age to be hearing like safety lessons on social media from a group of people from a generation where they're like, oh, you're new stuff that we're not really sure about, but it's still dangerous. I think it'd be, you know, more impactful if people our age were starting to step up and like create awareness within us, because we know that from our school, there's only a handful of us coming here, and we have a very small school, and so, you know, when something happens online, everybody knows about it. And so, you know, if we were, you know, kind of self-regulating, and I think, yeah, maybe you're right, you know, when we get older, we will be able to tell the younger generations, we did grow up with this stuff, we do understand. But right now for us, when the world is changing so quickly, I mean, when I grew up, we had I had an antenna on my first phone. And now my little sister doesn't even know what that is or what a record player is or anything like that. I do, she doesn't, but you know.
Well, and she'll have very different technologies than you have now, so she'll have the same issue. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, you ought to be asking yourself when you listen to people my age, when you listen to me, you ought to be asking yourself, so what can I take from him that helps me think, and what is he saying that's just total garbage because he's clueless? And I mean, that's a legitimate problem, right? I mean, part of your challenge as students is precisely to understand when what I'm saying is valuable and worthwhile, and when it simply does not reflect the world you live in. And you have to take that responsibility. Thank you. Sir.
Hi. I'd like to bring up a couple things. So, in terms of the way drones are being used, and it's not the drone that wants to invade your privacy, it's the people who are using the drone. I found that sort of similar in the way we view guns, where it's not the guns that kill people, it's the people that utilize the guns for killing and for destruction. And in that manner, you can think of it in a way, well, sure, it's not the drones invading your privacy, but it certainly is a powerful tool that people can use and in a lot of cases abuse in order to invade your privacy, in order to destroy your reputation, and do very, very harmful things to you in a different but still harmful way that the guns can. And that's an argument with gun control, is that, well, sure, it's not the guns that are killing people, but if we got rid of the guns, then there'd probably be less deaths. I mean, that's what we've seen in Australia, and that's what we've seen in some European countries, is where they've removed guns, and then mass murders going down. But so maybe in a similar setting, removing drones would eliminate privacy invasions of privacy on that aspect. But the second thing, when the government, government intelligence, police, they're sending drones over your house, over your sector, they're doing it for a reason. It's not because they hate you, and you mentioned it. They don't care about you. They care about the safety of the populace. They care about the safety of the people. So one trade-off that we've been saying is convenience for privacy. Well, how about our safety for privacy? Think about it in that way.
So, Brad, you've got 2 minutes and 3 more questions. So I'm wondering, do you want to hold your questions for the general panel, and he can respond to this very quickly? But you'll be first. Is that okay with you?
Okay.
Yes, you.
Why don't you both stay standing there, and we'll pull the panel up, and you as well.
So go very quickly.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good comment, and thank you and your table. The analogy is a good one. It's also good that you notice that there's a difference because guns have a pretty limited function. It's to eject a projectile at very high speed that is usually used for causing damage of some sort. Whereas drones have a wide potential set of uses, so the cost-benefit analysis of the technology is much more difficult. Very good comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to the panel. Is that it? And then we'll have the floor.
I'm going to invite Erika and Gary and Adriana to the front here, and please go ahead with your question.
Okay, concerning drones, one thing that I think is really important to address is that since drones are unmanned aerial vehicles, they're constantly taking in information around them. So every drone has some form of camera on it. So what I think needs to be addressed is how long can those pictures be retained and what can they be used for?
Right. And there's 2 thoughts with that. One is that's an excellent proposal for limiting the privacy impact of drones. Query how effective it would be if you tried to implement it with the kid next door, right? So you run into those kinds of issues. The government is actually a lot more easy to control than the kid next door. Very good comments. Thank you.
I'd like to invite everybody else to join these folks at the microphones if you've got other questions for any of the panelists about things that they talked about or things that you wish they talked about in our session this morning.
Okay, I have a quick question about drones and the policy concerning private drones and government-run drones for like air rights. Do you know what is the policy on like my home versus like a public institution or like on public roads? Like if I were to buy a drone, would I be able to fly it anywhere I want versus like a government drone?
The rule that is in effect now and is being reviewed by the FAA is that drones, the small drones which are available on Amazon.com, they are controlled as hobby devices. And the rule with a flying hobby device is that you can fly it up to 400 feet but no higher. That's for safety in the airspace. And you have to have line of sight control of the particular vehicle. So what that implies is that you would probably have trouble once you started getting into somebody else's house because you'd lose that line of sight. You could also think about trespass and using trespass on a drone. I'm not sure if that's been done, and I think Gary is up here. So Gary, you want to comment on that?
Several people have talked about bringing a trespass case, but I don't think there's been a decision on one.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be questionable whether it is a trespass on your property as opposed to. I don't think it'd be a trespass if it's in the air above your property, but it would be if it went inside your house.
Okay, so like we as individuals don't have like the rights to the air above our own houses.
Right, and the Supreme Court has twice now held, with one with a helicopter and one with an airplane, that the police are allowed to fly over your property and take pictures from above, but they cannot go inside your house.
Also, should be noted, Amazon now has, or is working with
the FAA trying to get the laws straight with regards to Amazon Air, where they're going to deliver packages, small packages to your doorstep.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a couple thoughts. One was just general online privacy. Prior to coming to this symposium, our teacher suggested we read a Wired.com article called Vanish about Evan Ratliff and how he disappeared for 30 days to see if he could stay missing while everyone else would try and use his internet information to find him. And I just thought that was interesting because he got an alias, he'd paid for everything in cash, and he even managed to create like false IP addresses so that people would track elsewhere. And they managed to find him in less than 30 days. So I was wondering, A, if there would ever be, or if there ever can be now that technology is furthering, that chance to truly disappear with a new alias, new name, or if that's kind of inevitable, because they used as little as his name. They knew how often he fed his cat. They knew his favorite books. They knew what kind of coffee he drank, just because some of his information was on the internet.
I think that time has passed. And also it should be noted that the Unabomber was very anti-technology, and we found him in a cabin, so.
Unless you're in the witness protection program.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't find them. It just means you're not supposed to.
And of course, we haven't talked in this meeting at all about genetic privacy, but that's the ultimate way to track you. You're leaving your DNA in the room every day. The FBI can go tomorrow and collect all of our DNA in the corner of the room from the dust that we're all emitting as we sit here, and can get your DNA and check it against their databases.
And then my other thought was on drones and how we brought up the idea that, like, when police want to search their house, they need a warrant. But if they can see something happening in your house, that need for a warrant is gone, and they can just walk inside. So, in theory, would drones remove the idea to need a warrant at all? If they can simply use it to say, "I can see in your house, I can go in your house."
That, right now, certainly that's not the case. If it becomes the case that you no longer have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your house, then that could be a problem. But that's part of the interesting thing about the Fourth Amendment. It has that technology-dependent expectation in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because there is a thing called the plain view doctrine, which is if the police can see something illegal inside your house from outside, they are allowed to then enter without a warrant. And so will this drone, which is also legal under another set of cases where it can fly on your property, if it can see inside your windows, is that going to greatly expand the power of this plain view doctrine? And the two coming together are something never anticipated before, but now technology is making possible.
And as a result of that, our test of reasonable expectation of privacy, we may want to rethink, is this the right test to give us privacy, or should we have a fundamental right to privacy, as other countries do?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my question to the panel is, how do we go about making our laws more dynamic for our world today? Because as a couple of you said, that our laws were made from 1986, correct? Something like that. 84. And so how do we, and our world is rapidly changing, and it's just exponentially changing quicker and faster every day we move. So how do we make our laws more dynamic so that way they cover a broader range of social media and drones and everything else?
So Brad and I were part of this NSF-funded project to try and answer that very question. It's a hard question to answer, but basically the answer is not Congress. Congress moves way too slow and is gridlocked. The answer is not our regulatory agencies. To do a regulation, our regulatory agencies have to go through about 20 different separate analyses, all of which take years and years to do, so they just can't do it. So what we eventually came to is that there's all kinds of other mechanisms that we call soft law, are things like private standards and other types of agreements and voluntary agreements where you get relevant stakeholders coming up with the substantive requirements. It's not directly enforceable, but it sets the standard of care that could be enforced by private law. So that was the best we could come up with, but it's a huge problem facing not just this area, but almost every area of technology right now.
So what you're saying right now, as far as we know, it's pretty much just covered under common sense. We don't have it really written down anywhere.
Well, so under tort law, you're required to use reasonable actions. Your activities have to be reasonable. So how do you define reasonable? If there's an industry standard or another document that says this is the expectations of a reasonable company, that could then be used as a sword or a shield in a litigation case against that company. And so that's sort of the best hope. I mean, they're not bulletproof by any means, but they at least provide some guidance to the courts. So the ABA, for example, the meeting I'm going to on Wednesday, they're having a big meeting of this new initiative saying it's going to be the courts who have to apply all the new laws for these technologies. Our legislatures, our regulatory agencies aren't going to be able to do this. So it's going to be the courts that are going to have to step up and do this. But the courts don't have any standards to apply. So that's what there needs to be. There needs to be some kind of document that a lot of people buy into that says, here's what we expect you to do as a reasonable person.
What would we base our standards on if we're rapidly changing?
Well, the good thing about these private standards is they can change much more quickly. And so there's a number of examples where that's actually the case. And so unlike regulation by government, which by design has to go very slow, some of these private standards can change, on a weekly, monthly basis if they need to.
All right, thank you.
But you also want to be careful because a lot of times law will be used by existing financial interests to try to stop progress. Like the Recording Association Industry of America was using laws to try to prevent downloading single tunes because their business model was sell you a CD full of songs you didn't want at a very high price. So you need to have a balance between managing the new and making sure that you don't allow progress to be stifled by existing economic interests.
And also one point, we're looking not only at US law, we are now global. We live in a global world, and other laws of other countries have an extraterritorial reach. So even if our laws are not up to date and we're self-regulating or whatnot, other countries will have, for these multinationals, an extraterritorial reach, and the same thing for their executives. Sometimes there's an issue. For example, the Gatekeepers Initiative. The EU put the Gatekeepers Initiative out there that says money launderers, tax evaders, if you know about it and you're a lawyer or an accountant, you go to jail if you don't speak up. The US doesn't have that. So there are conflict of laws. Microsoft right now is having an issue with the EU because the laws in the US want them to turn over certain emails that they have in Dublin. The EU says, no, this is not the right process. So we see conflicts of laws all the time, and that will help the US to further develop.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm just curious as to why examples such as revenge porn and the example of the man who blackmailed a young girl into leaking more nude photos were expressed as solely a privacy issue rather than a legal issue. Because I know for a fact that blackmail and the nudes of someone who is underage are really illegal, especially in the hands of an older man. So why? What was the stance from
So
a legal
because most of us are lawyers, privacy is a legal issue. We don't see a distinction. I mean, it's really the law that we really govern this by. And so one of the problems is when things get on the internet, like millions of people view it, and it's not, going online necessarily and viewing it isn't necessarily illegal. But yeah, I mean, so if a 50-year-old man distributes a picture of a 16-year-old girl naked, that's a violating the law, but it doesn't help protect her if it still gets out there, right? Mm-hmm. It might help deter it, and then a problem is a lot of people who do this are anonymous, or like, for example, the people who did all those cloud pictures, we don't know who did that still today. Right? So whoever did it may be committing a crime, particularly if there's minors involved, but we can't get at them because we don't know them, but nevertheless, those people have all been harmed.
Okay, thank you.
That's a very good point, and another point, which you haven't all studied law yet, but one action can subject you to all sorts of laws. Criminal law, which is you're guilty, you're going to jail. Tort law, which says you're liable, you have to pay money damages. So there will be different ways. A predator, we can go after a predator. There's a whole bunch of different laws out there for one action. You'll learn about that when you go to law school or when you study laws later.
Thank you.
The question is, should we care about our privacy? And I think we need to address that as teenagers in a whole. we do not have respect for ourselves, and especially women. Women and girls will post certain pictures, and the celebrities will take certain pictures, whether it's for their significant other or whatever the case may be. They are violating themselves and degrading themselves. And I think these women who are doing that do not care about their own privacy. It also, like what other people are saying, it's just a picture. And it's just this, it's not the end of the world. But if a picture of you just degrading yourself, of you not having enough self-esteem, your underlying problems, will that affect you in a potential job just because you have underlying problems of self-esteem or whatever the case may be, you need attention? Or does that affect you in the future because of your underlying problems, taking a picture or doing certain actions? That's my question.
Can I take it? First of all your actions do affect you. My comment earlier, and I want to make sure it's real clear, is if you make a mistake, we're all human and we all make mistakes, and you look forward to the future, and you can always do something to fix yourself. Don't go into despair. But yes, you have to be careful with what you're posting out there. This is, as Erika said, this is your brand. In the same way that we have companies with brands, you have Tiffany. When you think of a ritual, you think of Tiffany. If you're done with an exam, you go to Disney. In the same way, you have your brand, and your brand is the most valuable thing you have. It's your reputation. So you have to care for it in the same way that a company cares for their brand. And if somebody's going to attack that brand, move forward. You're the one that has the ability to fix it, and you're the one that has control of that. It's who your friends are. It's who, you may not be able to control the person that took the picture of you at the slumber party. It happens. It actually happened to me when my daughter had her friends over and they took a picture of me. And I'm like, okay, great, I've got all these students. I hope it doesn't end up in social media. So you don't always control who takes a picture of you, but you do control your reputation. You have the ability. We need privacy so that we can continue to do that. That's what I stand for. That's what I believe in. I believe in the right to privacy.
And I think we should care about our privacy, and as a whole, with social media and everything lately, we are too open, and we'll tweet or we'll Facebook status every little thing, or we'll post a video on Instagram degrading ourselves. And I think what we need to do is we really need to care about ourselves as a whole, as a person, and we need to worry about our privacy. And as teenagers, we need to worry about our future. So that's just my point.
Well, and that's an excellent point, and I want to go into that a little bit. If you happen to be, now this is what's interesting for the multinationals, like a Facebook. If you happen to have part of your group is from the EU and part of your group is from the US, the standard that I apply to the EU is going to have to apply to the US as well. So to the extent you need protection, if it's coming over here, these companies that are global want to apply the same standards to all their users. So it is going to help you with that, and it will help you to have more privacy.
Thank you.
I think also related to that, yes, I think some of the women, who end up in photos like that are degrading themselves and so forth. But I also think that there is human nature and experimentation, and you end up with very young people goofing around and just, it's a phase and they get over it. So it's important that events like this, people learn how to protect the brand and hopefully they won't post stuff like that.
Just as a last note, I just want to say to everyone, you should really worry about your privacy and be careful what you post on social media. Thank you.
I'm going to take this. Okay, going on to actually what she was talking about, everyone's really concerned about the privacy obviously, because, basically everything that we do is being recorded in some way, like even right now, we're being recorded. And there's this fear that comes with it. And I just want to ask about how personally that fear is affecting society today. Like, I came up here and I'm a really awkward and clumsy person, so I was in this fear that maybe I'm going to trip and then it's going to be recorded and then everyone's going to see it. And then I just realized that originally if I had tripped, I wouldn't really care. It's normal for me. So, but then people would be laughing. Then I will know it's recorded for forever, basically, because there's the cloud and it stays there in some way. It's always traceable. And then there's that fear nagging on me that, hey, maybe what I did was, really bad. It was really clumsy of me, and that's going to affect me in different situations. And so I just wanted to talk about, for any social media user, are you the one who's instilling that fear? Are you laughing at people's mistakes and just saying rude comments that maybe you don't think is rude, but to them it still hurts? And how can you just kind of reel yourself back from doing that? So how can we be more conscious about people? Because usually we're just looking at something and then of course we laugh because it looks funny. But then we go on and post, oh my gosh, that idiot just fell all over herself. And then originally I wouldn't have felt bad about falling because I'm human, I make mistakes. But then people keep on adding to that comment, and then everyone just kind of degrades them, not purposely. I'm not saying you're all bad people, but they're just going along with what other people are saying. So then I start thinking bad things about myself, and that's usually what happens in the cases of suicide, because people are unintentionally bullying because it's a screen. They don't see the actual person. They weren't there when they fell. And I just think that's a really serious problem that people should be aware of.
I agree with your point, and I think it's important to bring awareness to that. I think your generation knows and is becoming more aware. I can tell you things. I can tell you to watch out for those free apps. They're not free. You already know that. You already know that you're being tracked. We don't. Our senior citizens don't. So we're learning about this. You're more aware than we are, and what she's saying is true. It's mean and it's cruel. And the more you become aware of this technology and the danger that it can create, if you start tweeting, if you start sending pictures, your generation has the power to fix that. Your generation has the power to look at it. And your generation, when you get to be our age, will look at this very differently. As Brad had said, this culture is changing, and the way you're looking at each other and understanding each other is changing. Right now, we're trapped in this spot, trying to figure out our laws, trying to figure out how to analyze the information that's before us and how to protect you. Your generation will have a better grasp of this, and hopefully it will learn to tolerate each other better and understand the power of bullying in this space.
Yeah, and I just want to leave with one last comment. Nobody's the perfect person, so I understand how you're worried about how everything's not private, but don't be scared to make those mistakes, because that's what betters you as a person. And if you see something like that on social media, like somebody falling, and it's probably not them the person who fell, who posted, just ignore it. Just keep going.
Mm-hmm. Or make a comment about it and say, it's sad that people post it. You can always make a positive comment about it and say, wow, it's a shame that people post these things. When I see that, I'll usually make a comment, and it kind of makes the whole thing tank. So.
Thank you.
In a previous discussion, someone had mentioned that the rights of a photo are not given to the person in the photo, it's the person taking the photo. But I was just wondering, I know from personal experience, I take a lot of pictures with my friends' photos. They might ask me, oh, take a picture of me and my other friend. So am I the person having taken that photo with the rights, or is the person whose phone or camera it's on, do they own the rights to the photo?
It's the person who takes the photo. And you may have heard the recent orangutan case. where the orangutan took a picture on some guy's photo camera, and the orangutan owns the picture. He took the picture, not the guy who owns the camera, or the person who's in the picture.
Okay. So the only way to protect the rights of your photos are for you to take the picture of yourself, I guess then.
But also not to distribute it, right? Because once it's out there in the public domain, there's no more, you can't control it anymore. So if it's in a public domain, someone else can then take that picture and use it for a non-commercial purpose.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We've got 5 people and 5 minutes. So let's do some rapid fire through the questions and then open it up for a last comment from our panelists. So please go ahead.
Okay, hi. I understand why we shouldn't post our address or our phone number online, but why should we care, or should we even care, if like Google knows that we like to eat ice cream after breakups or stuff like that? Is it important? Should we care?
Great. We'll come back, I promise.
Mine was how in like even now, how we have like a semblance of privacy, because there's like Google Glass, there's other things. There's a camera like anywhere. So there you go.
Thanks.
I was wondering about the law of who has rights to the photo. Like in the U.S., it's the person who takes the photo, but you said in the EU, it's the person who's in the photo. So in the case of, say, like child pornography or something, if that gets leaked online or something, who is at fault? Who's legally, like, if a kid takes a picture of themselves, like, who's at fault there?
All right, I just had a real quick note about drones, and like all I hear about drones is like how like they're bad, my freedom taken away, you know, stuff like that. I just want to touch on like the police enforcement side of that is like it could be used to like say like you get mugged, but then a drone flies over, gets a picture of the guy, then also follows into his house, and like you get like a squad car there like almost immediately. But then like the other thing is like cameras like on like walls and stuff, they don't move. Like they could move like a little bit, but you can't like follow someone like there's a bank robbery or something like drone like over there. But then also like deter like crimes too. Like if like someone's trying to break into a car, but then they hear a drone overhead, they're like, oh crap, it's a drone, I gotta go. Yeah. All right, that's what I just wanted to say.
Thanks. So 3 cheers for drones in protection of private property and personal safety. And final comment before we turn it over to these weirdos.
How you doing? I would just like to thank the panel first, but also, I'm from Arcadia, and we were talking about kind of how the education of maybe privacy has been put into effect, and what ways education can help us on privacy. And also, are we jumping to making laws too quickly about privacy, or should we educate society about privacy before making these laws?
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, so great question. So to go back to the first one, are there some things we should just not care about, them being private or public? Do we have to worry about who owns the rights in a case of child pornography here or elsewhere? And 3 cheers for drones. Oh my gosh, I forgot one. And then the last comment, we just heard about whether in fact education might be a better approach than a legal approach. So I'm gonna, you don't have to answer all those questions, I hope you won't in fact, but I'm gonna have us go in order of the presentation. So Adriana, Erika, Gary, and Brad each get a couple of seconds to say a few interesting things.
Okay, with regards to ice cream, there's some things out there we probably don't care about, and that it actually might be good, like our iPhones, you know, they're collecting information and they're giving us more things that we want because they are able to collect this information. I just need to make you aware that they are collecting, and that's something sometimes people don't understand. So not everything they're taking from us, if they're going to make me better, if they're going to give me a better product, I might want that. On the other hand, if they're going to use it to later on limit the ability to hire me or my medical premiums go up, I won't want that. with regards to the EU and with regards to taking pictures, and if there's pornography, these are the types of issues. Of course, we have all of our social media networks want to stop pornography, want to stop pedophiles. The way it's going to be tackled probably is going to be very similar, but we have different security threats in different countries and different privacy protection regulation. And as a result of that, we're now trying to put it together so we can have harmonized efforts to try and tackle cyber criminals, pedophiles and whatnot.
Thanks, Adriana. Take-home message from Erika.
With regards to, do we care if Google has all this information on us and could make our lives more convenient and so forth? It's the thing with that is it's great now. Their motto is do no evil, and right now, like Google now got me here on time, and it made my life convenient and smooth. But what will Google do with my information tomorrow or another day? They have the information. We've already given up our rights to it. What are they going to do with it? That can change.
Thanks. Gary.
So just a quick legal thing. Child pornography has its own statutes. Every state has a statute, and taking, possessing, or distributing child pornography, even if you're underage, is a crime. So that's a blanket rule. So you got to be really, really careful about that. Second thing I just want to say is there's a great study put out by the Pew Foundation last week about how two things. We're all different in our views on what's private, so that makes it really hard to make laws if we have different views on whether we want Google to do this or that. And the second thing is what we say about privacy is completely inconsistent with what we actually do.
Thanks, Gary. And Brad.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that we've framed this as good, bad, laws. People like to search for simple answers, and the more complex an issue is, the more they want simple answers. There are no simple answers. And you don't want laws. You don't want people like Gary and I trying to figure out what your life should be. Your life is already different. It's different in ways that we really can't comprehend. And if you let us loose on your life, you're going to lose. What you really want to do is you want to be smart and work with each other and think about these things so that you can build a better world. Because our world is not your world, and the sooner Gary and I get over it, the better.
Thanks very much, Brad. I want to thank you all for joining us today for this panel and roundtable discussion. Two quick thoughts. There are still cookies. I know they have raisins, but there's still cookies over there. And secondly, Mary Drago will be sending around an evaluation form, and we'll look forward to your feedback as we change the format of this from year to year to try to figure out what's going to work best. We'll look forward to you helping us invent it again for next year. I do want to thank Mary Drago for her hard work on the logistics, and I want to thank all the teachers and administrators who support this event. I want to thank you all for participating, and again, give one last round of applause to these nice folks and to David Lincoln for making it possible.